It is now 7 p.m. Calling to order Trophy Club Municipal Utility District Number 1 Board of Directors. We have all 5 directors present. It's a special session joint meeting with the Trophy Club Town Council.
It's 7 p.m. I'll call our joint session for the council together, and we do have a quorum. All members are present.
No, they're not.
Oh, Schaffner's not here?
No.
Oh, he's not coming? I apologize. Thank you. Schaffner is absent.
Okay, now that we've been called to order, we're in a regular session. First item, and only item on the agenda is to consider and take appropriate action regarding the Fire Protection Services fiscal year 2020 budget. Chief Carroll.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, MUD Board, for having me up here tonight to talk about our 2020 budget, FY 2019-2020 budget. We're going to start out tonight going through a couple of things. I'd like to kind of point out what our budget goals were for this year and then talk about the highlights of the budget. At the end of the budget, and even during the budget, if you have any questions, please bring them up. We can go deeper into lines if you guys need to go deeper into lines at the conclusion of the budget, or even, like I said, in the middle. Just let me know when you have a question, and we'll move forward. The first of our budget goals was to maintain the current level of service that we're providing to our citizens. Currently, the fire department has 3 shifts. They run a 48-96 shift. Each shift is manned with 5 personnel. The minimum staffing during our peak time hours, which is 6:30 in the morning until 9:30 at night, we run 5-man minimum staffing. So if we have anybody off, that causes us to have to call somebody back on overtime or to use part-time staff in order to augment that overtime. During the non-peak time hours, we drop that down to 4. So in the middle of the night, when we generally have fewer calls, we drop that staffing down to 4. There are problems with that. At 5-man minimum staffing, we fully staff a truck and an ambulance, right? So if 2 calls were to come in at once, we can split those crews, and we can adequately run either 2 EMS calls or an EMS and a fire call or a wreck or something like that with 5 guys on a scene, or with either 2 on an EMS call and 3 on a fire call. We have had instances in this past year, or 2 years actually, where we've had a fire call come in after an EMS call, or we've had 2 EMS calls come in at once when we were on a fire call, which really hurts our staffing, and that's when you'll see our mutual aid partners come into the city and get to help us out with that. So our next budget goal was to preserve the fiscal stewardship by providing a conservative budget that does not exceed the previous year's requests in all areas outside of personnel. So we did our best this year to try to squeeze into what we had last year, the same services and supplies that we used last year, but there were increases on the personnel side, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. We are currently using, as we talked about earlier, using part-time staffing to help us with these personnel costs. Part-time staffing makes $17.50 an hour, which is considerably less than a firefighter makes on overtime, and they're currently taking up about 70 to 75% of our overtime needs on a daily basis or on a monthly basis. Our last budget goal is to adhere to the department's fleet and equipment replacement plans, ensuring our ability to respond and work safely on emergency scenes. By adhering to our department's emergency equipment replacement plan, we ensure that the equipment is placed in service is in date. So in other words, that equipment is not called to be replaced. Each manufacturer of all of our safety equipment, all of our emergency equipment, they give a life cycle to that equipment. For instance, the extrication tools have a 10-year life cycle. Even our cots that we have in the back of the ambulance have a 7-year life cycle. SCBA, the brackets that hold the SCBA equipment, they're good for 10 years, but the bottles are only good for 5. And they have to be hydrostatically tested, and they're good for another 3. So there's all these rules like that are in place for all that safety equipment. So by adhering to this department replacement plan, we're replacing that equipment as we need to and as the manufacturer calls for, so that we ensure that the safety of our personnel during our training exercises and during those live emergency scenes. So next, I just want to talk about what you're going to see, the big changes that we're going to see in the budget. So obviously, there's an increase that we talked about and that you guys got in your packets on the personnel side of the budget. There was an overall increase of about 7% on the personnel side of the budget. This included the fire marshal position at 50%. If you guys will recall, and ladies will recall, that last year we actually hired Gary Cochran as our fire marshal in a full-time basis. But last year we received an AFG grant that fully funded his salary and all of his benefits for 1 year. So we're still working off that grant today. We have applied for that grant. The methodology we use to apply for the grant really gives us the ability to apply for it for 2 more years. So we've applied for it this year as well, and we hope to get it. We're confident that we're going to get it because of how high we scored last year. So last year AFG gave away about 300 to 400 grants. We were number 46. So being that high on the grant list means that even if we get bumped down a little bit, we're probably going to be within that 300 to 400 again this year. So long as the money doesn't run out. So they look at each one of those grants. This is the highest priority. This is our number one that we want to give to. That money's now off the table. So if it's $1 million or it's $5,000, it doesn't make any difference. That money just starts whittling away as the grants are approved. The fire marshal position is a vital position in our department now. He oversees all the new construction that we have in town. He also oversees our public education programs and our annual fire inspections programs. I've given both the board and council reports on our weekly report and our monthly report to the MUD that talks about how often we're going out and we're actually, Gary's finding things in these inspections. I think he's cleared close to 1,000 violations in the past year and a half. And almost all of those have been fixed or cleared now. So he's doing an outstanding job, and we love having him around. He's also helping out operationally. So before Gary came along, with me being the only staff officer, I was on call every time we had a fire. And this way now, on occasion, I get to go on a vacation like we did just now. And Gary was able to hold it together. Gary's got a ton of experience as a fire marshal and as a fire officer, and he's doing just an outstanding job for us.
Wait, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
What is AFG? I know it's a dumb question, but what's AFG?
Assistant to Firefighters Grant. Yeah. I should have put that in there, I'm sorry. So also as part of that 7%, you're going to see that we have $20,000 in a salary line for employees. Just general raises for employees. That gives us a couple of options. We give a 3% raise to all employees, but the methodology we've been using over the past couple of years is a pay performance methodology. So high performers get a little bit more, low performers don't get as much in that budget. So I'm sure that we're going to be using that same methodology again as we move forward with our new town manager. This slide kind of outlines just exactly what we talked about. The increase for the fire marshal's salary and the 3% increase makes up your 20% that you see there. Actually, it's a little less than this 20%. If you look here, this 20% is actually a makeup from our 2019 estimate to the 2020. If you back it up to the 2019, what we actually budgeted for, to the 2020, what we budgeted for, that's where you're going to see that 7% increase. That 545, 642 is actually from salary savings. We had 3 openings this year that we have currently filled, but throughout the year we saw quite a bit of salary savings from that. And then this estimate was year to date as well. It does not include the last portion of the year. The only other thing that you're going to see that looks a little strange in here is medical insurance. And I'm actually going to throw that over to to Cheryl. Cheryl Davenport, we've hired as our interim finance manager. So she's come to us from SGR, and she's doing an outstanding job. She's had a tough job of seeing someone else's budget that was put together and trying to figure all that stuff out as John Z left us. So she's kind of working hard to get these numbers correct. Cheryl?
Can y'all? Okay, there it is. On the medical insurance line, the budget for last year for 2019 was $74,126. And it looks kind of funny because the estimate for 2019 is 90,000 and it drops down to 86,000. Well, the 90,000 increase includes an adjusting entry the auditors made of 17,000 that we're trying to track down why they made that entry. But looking at what we spent so far and excluding that entry, and with originally we projected about a 15% increase in medical insurance, that would be 86,000 for the budget. Preliminary indications are it won't be a 15% increase, but the 86,000 is very conservative.
So,
Medical insurance.
yes.
Will you let council know, I'm sure the MUD will wanna know as well, will y'all find out the answer to that 17,000?
Yes, I sure will. I sure will.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
under your 2019 estimate, so are you anticipating that you're going to spend $90,800?
No, sir. That included that 17,000 that she talked about, which was a budget entry that we don't understand why exactly that was made. When you look at what we're actually spending year to date, we look to spend closer to that 75,000 number.
Okay, so your original budget item appears to be pretty accurate.
That's correct. It is. And that's when you see that, that our new budget estimate at 15% on top of, that's where we get the 86% or 86,000. We are in those negotiations currently. We're looking at probably more like a 7 to 8% increase at the worst. And we're working with we've got dental out for bid as well, which looks like if we get to bundle that with our medical insurance through our current insurance provider, we may be even less than 7 or 8%. So we're very hopeful. But those negotiations are still going on. Any
So
other-
the question for you,
Yes,
Chief. The 86,631 and the 6,837 for dental, those represent what you think you're gonna have as the increase or the new price?
Yes, those are conservative though. This 86 is at 15%, so it's going to come in lower than that.
Okay,
And
all
the
right.
same with the dental. I think that's
Okay.
going to come in lower as well. You have to remember these were just our best guess estimate within about 30 days ago or so, before we actually started into that negotiation process. Things are coming back now to HR and things are looking much better. Yes, sir.
And that number also includes your new officers that you've hired on here, correct?
That's correct. That's a fully staffed department. That is correct. So what you'll see is we got about a $43,000 change in the salaries line, and the associated cost with that is about $9,600 to go with those increases that we talked about earlier. All right, for some good news. So this year, some of the other changes that you're going to see is that as we go through those services and supplies budget, we actually decrease that budget by about 2%. A lot of that is kind of just looking from year to year at what we spend and getting closer and closer. Now that this is my third budget year, we're actually getting some decent numbers in there and being able to track over a 3-year period. We're starting to get a little more accurate on what those lines are. As you can recall, that first year we really had to do a lot of right sizing, and I applaud the MUD board and council for helping us to right-size this budget. It was woefully under-budgeted, the service that our citizens were getting when I started 3 years ago. So I definitely applaud you guys and thank you for the amount of training that we're getting now and really the services that you're providing your citizens by letting us go to a 5-man minimum staffing during those peak time hours. That has truly changed the service that we get to provide everyone, so we appreciate that. Some of the other big numbers that you're going to see or big changes that you're going to see within there, as you go line by line, you're going to see a $4,000 increase in software and support. Obviously, with that 2% decrease overall, those monies were shifted around from other budget lines. We were able to save some dollars. That $4,000 increase in software and support pays for a new record management system for us. Our current record management system is not cloud-based. It has a limited of 2 users at a time. So if I'm on the system and somebody's writing a report, I can't have Gary entering inspection reports. We've only get 2 users on that system at once. It also requires us to have a hard line back and forth to Denton County. So that line actually goes from Denton County to the new town hall and back over to us, which slows that connection incredibly. I can't work on Firehouse at home unless I log in through our system, and again, that slows us down. So really this new system, it's all cloud-based and is going to allow us to work more efficiently. Gonna allow more users to be on at the same time. But one of the biggest things I'm excited about is it has a very robust analytics component. It has a dashboard built into it so we can better monitor our benchmarks throughout the year. Each captain gives benchmarks on everything from response time to the number of training hours they get. All those are given to me in a monthly officers meeting. They tell us what they plan for in the next year, and we compare that to what they actually did or not the next year, the next month, to what they actually do that month. So this software is going to help us to stay on top of those benchmarks a little better. That increase of $8,500 in communication pagers and mobiles. Originally, I think when you guys got that number, it was a little higher than that. We have since changed that on the budget that you guys received this last Friday. When Mike Pastor, our IT director, he got in here and really hit those numbers hard and looked at what why that increase was there. It appears that in this last year's budget, we did not charge the fire department on the MUD side. We did it on the EMS side, but on the fire side, we did not charge for internet access. So basic internet access, and then several of our not point-to-point system, but you know what, Mike, come on up here. I'm gonna let you, he's the IT expert. Why don't we let him actually speak for himself instead of letting the old fire chief talk.
In a nutshell, it was incorrectly budgeted. The numbers were incorrect. The level of detail that I had versus what was in there was different, and that's really what the problem was.
What were those items though?
The individual phones, the communication links, there's three parts on the fire and the police. The connection from the fire station to the town hall is one connection. The connection from the town hall out is another connection, and then we have a dedicated connection for the police and fire to access Denton County for their records specifically. So those were incorrectly budgeted.
So really what happened is that 50% share of that cost. So he breaks all that out and separates police and fire, and we get a specific share for each of those services, and we didn't get our specific share into the budget for some reason.
So Chief, it's really not new pagers or mobiles or anything like that, right? It's just an accounting issue. Right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Chief, what's the web-based software you're going to for records management?
ERS? Yeah, Emergency Response Systems. All right, so the last increase that you see there is a $4,000 increase in building maintenance. So this past year, we've had some problems that have creeped into our new building over there. I say new building, it's about 8-9 years old now, but it's still in very good shape. But in our fire sprinkler system this last year, we've had some condensation buildup that caused some small rust holes and made the airtight system not airtight anymore, as you can imagine. So there's a jockey pump that runs to keep that thing filled with air, and that basically keeps the water off of that dry system. We've gotten the pipe fixed, we've gotten all the condensation out of that drain, but we're afraid that the extra use on that jockey pump is actually going to cause it to have to be replaced in this next year's cycle. So that's what a lot of that $4,000 is to replace that air compressor. We also have some money in there for a roof leak that we've had. So we've gotten the roof leak fixed, but what we found is in the specific area it is, unless we tear off about a third of this roof and redo it at a cost of $10, $12, $15, I've got one estimate for as much as $17,000 back to get it done. Really, we can do the same thing with some annual maintenance. So annual maintenance of a couple $100, and we're going to be able to get that done. So that is in there. And then we've got some of our furniture now that it's 8 years old. Some of the furniture is beginning to fall apart a little bit. So we just need some of the repair, some equipment to repair, and then possibly even some new furniture in there as well. Yes, sir.
Question on the roof. What was the original roof warranty from the new
We've
build?
looked into all that, and we're past that original roof
Really?
warranty. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I can't tell you exactly what the years were, but I remember we looked at that when we first went that direction. All right, the only other significant changes that you're going to see in this budget over last year, other than small amounts here and there, is going to be through the capital expenditures. So this year, the capital expenditures that we're looking for is a replacement pickup for the fire marshal. And we'll talk about each one of them here in just a minute. And we're also looking for those new extrication tools and then some computer equipment that are on the replacement plan. So the fire marshal's vehicle, his current vehicle you see there on the left, that's a really good picture, Gary. I don't know how you got that, but it's a 2006 model, and it's got about 77,000 miles on it. So it's not really high mileage, but the front end's out on it, so we're about to have to replace the front end, and the motor's missing as well. So we're gonna have some high dollar maintenance coming up on that vehicle if it wasn't replaced. We are asking to replace that vehicle with the same Ford F-150. It would be a slick top because it's a take-home vehicle for him, and it will have the lights and sirens just like my vehicle has. He needs a pickup because he's got tools for a dig if he has to go in there and dig out a fire. He can't keep a lot of that equipment that he uses to dig out those fires in the back of his like an SUV or something like that because of the carcinogens. Yes, sir.
So we have a capital replacement plan.
Yes, sir.
How does this fit in the capital replacement plan? What triggered the
So that
buy?
2006 vehicle is scheduled to replace. If you look at that 2006 vehicle, it's scheduled to be replaced. Going off of the mileage, the maintenance cost year to date, all that goes into that formula. That truck that we have, that 2006, we did not purchase that truck. That truck was actually given to us from the streets department. So when Gary came on, we didn't have a pickup to give him. So the streets department, they looked at their fleet and said, hey, we've got this pickup truck sitting over here in the corner that we're not using anymore, and you're more than welcome to take that. So we thought that was a better avenue to go that first year, because again, like we said, we weren't sure how this thing would play out. We didn't want to take a capital expense on that we necessarily would have to end abruptly. So we waited for a year to make sure that everything's working out like it is, and everything's working out great.
So what's the year on the capital replacement plan? Is it a 12-year?
No, sir. It's a combination. It's the federal government plan, so it's a combination of the years on the vehicle plus the mileage, plus the maintenance that you spent on it, and then anything that needs to get fixed in the future. So they add all those things together, and you have to have a score that comes up.
So when we're working on our replacement plan for this vehicle,
Yes, sir.
at what year would you budget it? How many years out?
Oh gosh, this thing will, as few miles as we get on these trucks, they take more of a beating than they actually get miles. I would say it would last at least 8 to 10 years.
And we've had this one longer.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So Chief, can you walk me through the numbers, or maybe again, how do you get to the 20,000, and what's gonna happen to the old truck? Is that gonna be sold off?
Yes, sir.
Number one?
So we would be auctioning off the old truck or trading it in. It kind of depends on how those numbers come back. And that's one of the capital item discussions that we're going to have here at the end, because that $20,000 is half. A pickup truck doesn't cost $20,000, and you're going to put $8,000 or $10,000 worth of radios and emergency equipment on it. So you're going to spend $30,000 on a pretty bare minimum pickup anymore. So that $20,000 is half of that expense of what we're expecting to spend for that. And we'll go into a little bit further if you'll let me. A little later on.
I think we have a
yes,
question by Vice President Rose.
I was going to ask for more amplification on exactly what's wrong with the truck.
Well, it's got a real bad pop in the front end as I'm just driving normally. You can feel it pop like at any given time. It feels like it's just going to come out from underneath it.
But what's it diagnosed as?
I haven't had it in to have it diagnosed.
Okay.
And the engine I have had diagnosed, and it's got two or three of they're not called spark plugs anymore. They're called
Coil packs.
That have gone bad, and they have replaced them before already. But it's just a matter of time that the domino effect takes effect, and that's what's going on now. As they've replaced 3 now, 6 other ones are starting to fail.
So you've replaced 3 and 6 others are failing?
Yeah, so they said we can replace all of them at one time.
You have a 9-cylinder vehicle?
So, well, my bad. 5 others are going bad.
Okay.
So he said that I can replace 3 right now, the 3 that are bad, but it's just a matter of time that the other 5 are gonna, you know.
For a cost of,
They're about $1,000 to replace all of them.
to replace a set of 8,
Yes, sir.
okay? And the front end, we don't have a diagnosis on that one.
No, sir, I do not.
Just out of curiosity, how did the tires look on the front of the vehicle?
We just bought new
Normal?
tires
We
within the
replaced the
last
tires
year,
when we got
so
the
they're in good shape. And I don't think it's more of an alignment issue. I think it's more of an A-frame type issue or some tension bars or something underneath popping.
Okay.
I'm not real sure.
We'll have to get that looked at.
So if, when you said $20,000 is half, I didn't quite follow why it's half and where's the other half coming from?
Okay, so that brings up a discussion that we can go ahead and skip to.
Yeah, because that begged additional questions.
That's right. The others, you may not have that many questions on anyway either. So really, this boils down to where we need some direction from both council and the board. So we have shared assets, and over the last several years, we've tried to get away from actually owning shared assets because you can't. It's difficult for us to account for half of something on the books, right? But the reality is we have shared assets, right? We have an asset that is used for both fire and EMS. So it's very difficult to say this side takes all of this asset and this side takes all of that asset, right? So we do that through our personnel. So we share that personnel expense because they're doing both fire and EMS, right? We do that through some of the equipment as we, in the past. But again, like I said, over the past several years, there's been this push to separate that out and allow the MUD to control some of the assets and the town to control some of the assets so that we can carry it more easily on our books. Where we need direction from you guys is just that. On these 2 capital assets that we're going to speak of, and that's the fire truck for the not the fire truck, the pickup truck for the fire marshal, and then the IT replacements, which the IT replacements are new laptop computers. We rotate those out every 4 years. I think these are actually a little older than 4 years old, aren't they, Mike? They'll be in their 5th year this next year. So these Panasonic Toughbooks computers are about $6,000 a shot, but they'll withstand the heat from being in the fire trucks and sitting on those dashes all day long. And they have no problem starting up. They're military grade equipment, and that's the kind of thing that we require inside those vehicles. So this is to replace the newer computers have a different, of course, just like anything else, you buy a new phone and you got to get a new charger, right? So it's the same thing with these computers. We buy a new computer, it's going to require a new base, which is going to require new mounting hardware. So it's going to require all the mounting hardware and the labor to install it. All told, each of these are going to total out to a little over $19,000 total for 3 units, right? For three of these computers, software and the mounting hardware. So that is a shared asset, just like the pickup. The fire marshal does not just do fire response. He responds to EMS calls as well. The fire marshal doesn't just do fire prevention teaching. He does safety prevention, right? So, or not safety prevention, but he does safety classes. He's in charge of all of our public education programs. So he is a shared asset. So the vehicle that he has is truly a shared asset as well because it's going to all these types of different events. And then the same with the IT replacements. So those laptop computers, we don't just use them on fire calls, we use them on EMS calls as well. So those are truly shared assets. Whose books they actually reside on and how we divvy up how that split is done is truly a policy issue. And what we'd like to do is get some input from you guys on how we would like to see those things move forward.
So question, Chief, of the IT replacements, what portion of them would be EMS versus fire? Half, 30%, what?
It's hard to say. If you look at just call volume and you wanted to just take our call volume, for instance, we're about 60,
Really, I'm
65.
talking about physical location. So if you're putting a book in each piece of vehicle,
Okay. Then we have.
they don't move between vehicles, do they?
No, the ambulance we move, but the fire truck we don't. So there's 2 for the fire, one in each fire truck, and then one in the ambulance.
Okay, so you got 3 total. Okay, all right, thank you.
Whenever you make a call, does a fire truck and an ambulance go to the call?
Every time, yes, sir.
It doesn't matter.
Well, you mentioned the fire truck, 100% the truck is 40K, plus the equipment inside of it's another 19.5. So is it a total of basically 60K?
No, sir. The $40,000 for the truck includes its equipment.
Okay, so these are, you're just identifying the,
That's correct. The 9750 are for the other vehicles that we have. Those are computers that are in the fire truck, the fire engine, and the ambulance, not the fire marshal's pickup.
But the fire marshal's pickup currently doesn't have that equipment in it,
It
correct?
does not. He does not. We were able to buy an iPad through the grant process, and he uses an iPad for that same job. But he gets to carry that iPad in with him because he does his inspections on it. So it's never sitting in a vehicle on the dash or anything like that for long periods of time, like the tough books are. Does that make sense?
I think what I was looking at, I appreciate Eric's comment to say that all the vehicles are going every time. If you were trying to say I was gonna put one of those assets on the books of one entity and 2 on the other entity, is one option, as you say, one of them goes to the town, 2 of them go to the mud, or vice versa, as assets, so that you really truthfully kind of account for them where they're used, versus you're splitting the money trying to figure it out. So you actually list a piece of asset, which I thought is where we were trying to head, to where we really list assets and not just a dollar amount. And then the fire marshal's truck then becomes a different issue, because it is a shared service person, but you've got an asset that how do you figure out, how do you account for it on the books as a fixed asset,
That's correct.
right? So what's your proposal to solve that problem? Do you have a solution?
Yes, sir. My proposal is that the town buy the vehicle, we carry it on our books. And what I was hoping to do is that the MUD would be able to pay towards that purchase as well. But if not, we are actually replacing a streets vehicle, right? So that vehicle is already on the town's books. So we're replacing that, taking that from service, so we'd be putting this one in. There would be no additional cost for insurance. There'd be no really additional cost for maintenance or anything along those lines, because it's already a town-purposed vehicle. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Eric.
Do you have any assets currently that are on the town and the MUD's asset list?
No, sir.
So they're on one or the other?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So still asking about the $40,000. You're saying that that would be on the town asset list, is your proposal, but part of it would be reimbursed by the MUD?
That's my proposal, yes.
How much of that?
Well, that's what we have up for discussion, correct? Whether it's a 50%, it probably shouldn't be a 50%, because then that brings it into a shared asset, right? But we could go as far as pulling the types of calls he goes on. We could go into pulling as much information as we could to try to come up with some mathematical formula. Or we could just say, you know what, it's a town's vehicle that we were replacing, and we're gonna replace it on the town side.
So what's the proposal for the 19.5 for the IT? Because you have the same situation, right?
Yes, sir. Same situation. Honestly, we were looking for direction from there. We were trying to figure out the best way to get that done, whether that's a purchase all on one side or the other, and the other side pay towards it, or whether we just list them as you mentioned.
So is the life expectancy of the fire marshal's truck longer than the technology equipment?
Yes,
How much? Twice?
at least. Yes, sir.
So if one party paid the 40,000, the other party paid the 19.5, in half the time you're gonna pay another 19.5 if you bought the computers, if the computers are your responsibility,
That's
in
correct.
theory, which then kinda equals it out. It's just trying to simplify it. Eric?
Whose asset list your vehicle?
The towns.
Okay? Go through every vehicle and tell us whose asset is listed for each vehicle in the fire department.
Both ambulances are on the town along with my vehicle. The rest of the equipment all belong to the MUD.
Okay?
That's
When
the
the
fire
ambulance were-
engine, fire truck, the red truck that we use for the red hats or the rehab team, and we use taking back and forth to training, and the brush truck.
Did the MUD reimburse a percentage for the ambulance that are on the town's asset list?
No, sir.
Town paid for 100% with no reimbursement.
That's correct.
If that's the case, I easily support the town fully funding the fire marshal's truck. We need to make that a motion.
Mr. Rose?
And it seems to me that as far as the tough books or the computer equipment, that computer equipment that is going inside the fire trucks, to me, is something that the MUD should fund just as I would fund a tire for a fire truck. And the one going in the ambulance would be funded by the town as part of the equipment that goes with that particular vehicle, would be my thought.
All right, so I think I have a council person who wants to maybe make a motion. Do you, Eric?
Make a motion that the authorize town staff to include purchase of new vehicle not to exceed $40,000 for the fire marshal, and the purchase of necessary IT equipment for the two ambulances,
Just one, yes, sir.
one ambulance, to also be included as on the fiscal year 2020 town budget.
Second.
All right, so I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Jensen and a second by Fleury. Any further discussion? I support the idea of doing that personally, so. Bud, have any comments?
No comments.
All right, all in favor of the well, let me, before I call the motion, Chief, any comments about that you want to make?
No, sir, I think that's more than fair.
All right. Any other council members' comments? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please show your hands. It is unanimous. It carries.
Well, as hard as you thought.
So, town's buying the truck, and the town's buying pieces of equipment that deal with their vehicles,
That's correct.
to simplify it. Yes.
And I move that the MUD purchase the 2 computer setups for the fire trucks, for the fire vehicles.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to purchase 2 computer setups for the 2 fire trucks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Secretary Treasurer Flynn. Any discussion on the MUD side? Hal? Staff? Hear none, seeing none. All in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, that only leaves one piece of equipment left on the capital asset list, and that's the extrication equipment. The extrication equipment was actually scheduled for replacement last year, but we removed that from the budget in order to stay under the rollback rate last year. This means that the extrication equipment has now been used 1 year outside of its expected life or recommended life by the manufacturer. The new equipment that we propose to purchase is electric-driven hydraulic tools, which are actually stronger than the old traditional hydraulic tools. The new equipment is specifically designed to be used with the new vehicles, the higher tensile strength and the new steels, the borons, and that type of thing that's in the vehicles today. We would like to replace the old equipment with the new equipment at a cost of $35,000.
Chief, I have a question on the equipment.
Yes, sir.
Where is it carried?
On the engine.
On the engine.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Or the truck, actually. Yes, sir.
And the old equipment, does anything happen with that?
We will send that to auction unless they'll give us trade-in value. The chances are we'll get no trade-in value since it's past its lifespan. Yes, sir.
Did the old equipment have any problems with the new cars? Did you have any instances where it did not work
or
Oh,
had a problem
We
with
had
it?
problems in training only. We've never had problems on a live accident scene.
But it did pose problems when you were
That's
training with
correct,
it?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no more questions, we gave our capital
that
asset
funded?
discussion. Thank you very much for that.
We get that,
um,
did we get, did we need to, take action to specifically address that emergency equipment?
Yes, sir. Actually, in the budget recap, I was going to suggest that, that purchase be made through reserve funds that we currently have. If we purchase the computers that you're talking about and the extrication equipment that we're talking about through the reserves in the fire department, which the fire department has a healthy reserve, Stephen would have to help me with the exact number. But I do know that through the true-up this last year, the town actually cut a check back to the MUD for about $130,000, which would more than pay for that equipment without hurting our current standings.
Okay, now, does that $130,000, or does the true-up number remain within the fire budget and remain with the fire department?
That's correct.
So, right now, when that comes across, do we need to, as a board, at some point, make a determination where those funds go, or did they just automatically go into a general reserve at the fire department?
So I just deposited the check on Friday, and I'll transfer that over tomorrow, and it'll be in the fire fund for it.
So we have made up the 70-some thousand dollars that we moved out of reserves last year for the issue.
Correct. So currently, right now, we're sitting about 700,000. I have three more payments, 56 to come out for the transfer to the town. Then we have yet to do the exhaust system. We haven't paid for it yet for this fiscal year, so that still needs to come out.
How much is that?
I think we're at 64.
Yes.
So that's 210. 56 3 times plus
you
64,
don't-
so
yeah.
that's
Minus
actually
what-
about
yeah, so-
220.
Yeah, so we'll have roughly about 500 plus the 130 going in is what we're looking at.
Mr. President, it's my understanding that in order for us to stay under the rollback rate, we would have to budget a revenue from reserves to this budget to keep the other revenue under the rollback rate. So we're effectively, budgeting that out of reserves, which is not shown in the current document.
So I'll kind of speak on that real quick. Chief Carroll, what is you said 6,000 per laptop. Is there any other things besides the two laptops?
Yeah,
For the,
that includes the mounting hardware. You have to buy the mounting hardware as well that we talked
so
about
how much do I
earlier.
need to add?
Mike,
I'm doing some subtraction here so we can make sure what we have.
no problem.
The 6,500 is the blanket cost.
So
Because the
65
tough
per
book
piece.
itself is between 45 and 4,800. It's all the other equipment, the installation, the mounting base, and then the mounting top. Sometimes this is the opportunity to do software upgrades. That's where the total number is.
Okay.
So it should be less than 6,500.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. So that is the reason that we are asking that that purchase be taken out of the reserve for the capital purchases. We would never want to have to see recurring costs go into a reserve account, right? But that's what we kind of figure reserve accounts are for, is for these large capital items that happen every so often, like the ventilation system.
Is this covered under GASB? Is this Stephen, is this a GASB? When I say this, I'm speaking specifically of the extra.
I mean, that would be a board
Emergency
decision. Right now, I have to do the math on how much in there, but we've been putting aside for a new ladder truck, which would be another topic at future discussion.
Okay,
Now, that's set alone from what's in the account, so roughly the 500 plus the 130 going in, that's GASB set alone at different savings, so that's not part of that.
And so these are replaced, you say every 4 years?
Yes, sir, 4 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, if there's 6,500 over 4 years, that's $1,600 a year. If we can't swing that in the budget, we have bigger issues.
yeah.
So going into today, just for the directors to know, we were about $35,000 short from being able to get under the rollback rate. Now that we did a little bit of changes here with the 20,000 coming out, but adding the extra computer a little bit, we can decide, or the board can decide how they want to take that. We're still over the rollback rate until we decide what we want to fund out of the reserves.
What's the number?
The total number now would be, a second here. About 26,000.
So that's the amount we would need to pull from reserves to stay beneath the rollback rate?
That's correct.
Does that 26,000 include the extrication equipment or no?
That's correct.
It does include?
Well, I haven't touched, that's, nothing right now is coming out, so
Okay. So if you took the extrication equipment out
if
of
you did
reserves,
just, correct.
then we would be under the rollback rate.
Is there anything else that needs to be considered as part of it?
No, sir. That's the end of the presentation. Take any other questions that you might have.
Eric?
Mr. Jensen?
Sir, I've got a few. First, travel and per diem. You went up substantially from an estimated 10,500 used in fiscal year 19 to 14,500 budgeted. So why the big jump?
There's actually not that big of a jump. That $10,000 mark was actually a year-to-date number, not an estimate for the year end.
Thank
We
you.
still got two more trainings coming.
You budget every year but never spend advertising.
Yes, sir.
You went 500, 750, 1,500. Why would you budget it if you haven't spent it the last 2 years?
Well, the jump is mainly because I couldn't buy any advertisement for that amount. We were trying to get a recruitment video made, and the cost of a recruitment video is around $3,000. So I was going to split that cost between the MUD and the town to get a recruitment video made for us for future openings.
Okay. You have talked about no increase on personnel. Services and supplies, I counted 10 items that your 2020 proposed is less than your 2019 estimate. And then when you're saying the 19 estimate's actually year-to-date, that even makes me more concerned that your 2020 proposed is less than the estimate.
So-
some of them are no big deal, but 10 items to me was a lot of items.
Right. And I just have to eat a little crow on that, Mr. Jensen. Councilmember Jensen. As I went through this budget, most of these estimates are, if they're very close to that previous year's budget, I'd taken the time to go through and actually get that estimate updated. I ran out of time before this last Friday to get all those estimates where they needed to be.
You should have had your interim fire chief get to work.
Mr. Rose?
I'm probably in the same mode as Councilmember Jensen. I was looking just right off the top at professional outside services, and I'm using your budget, the town's budget, as opposed to the MUD's budget. I'll make this clear, because your budget has estimates for the fiscal year in them. What we have on the MUD side, that detail's lacking. So on professional outside services, as I look at the budget was 3,000, you're estimating to spend the 3,000.
Yes, sir.
Then in 2020, you're going to 5,500, and your 2021 projected's down at 1,515.
Yes, sir.
What's
So-
going on with outside services?
Professional outside services. So I've identified a need for some leadership training in the fire department. So my plan is to get an outside instructor. I'm going to do some of the classes internally, but we're going to get some outside instructors to help us out this year. That'll spend up the $3,000 that we have budgeted. Next year, there's a specific gentleman, his name is Randy Cantrell, that I've gotten bids for specific leadership coaching to help us with our 4 captains, to kind of bring those guys along. What I've identified over the before I came, there was absolutely no leadership coaching, no leadership classes that were ever done in the fire department, ever completed in the fire department. So we've been working internally. We've gone through a book. We've done several things internally to get them as far along as we possibly can. Now it's time for us to start bringing in some outside expertise to help us as well.
Okay, does that same thing show up in the schools and training line then, where we go from 24 budgeted this year, actual at 22, going back up to 24.5, then to 31, and then dropping back down to 25 in future years? That's,
Yes, sir. So those are classes. So if you look, you can't look because you didn't see. So I can actually give this to you and show you. But each year in our schools and training, that budget's going to change somewhat. So what I do is I ask the guys, what do they want to go to? What do they want to learn this year, right? That's added into their annual evaluations, along with the things that I think are important that I feel like they're weak in that they need to learn. So each year that training budget should fluctuate somewhat,
okay,
depending on the classes that they need to attend.
okay. I am an advocate of training, so, yeah. Down on uniforms,
Yes, sir.
I find it, I mean, we're talking smaller numbers now, but it's bouncing around.
Yes,
When
sir.
we say uniforms, are we talking things like bunker gear, or is that,
Uniforms are station wear.
okay,
So our general station wear.
okay, so that's up a little and then back down again.
Yes, sir. So we budget for so many uniforms a year, but we buy them in lots. So every 2-3 years we need to buy T-shirts, and then we have some set back. So if you ruin a T-shirt, I'm not having to worry about where it's coming from or anything like that. I've got a stash of T-shirts. I can give you a T-shirt. We ruined some uniform pants. The Nomex uniform pants are about $100 a pair. Nomex uniform shirts are about $100 a pair. So anytime we have some of that going on, those are stocks that we're building up
Okay.
stock, and then we're giving those out when you see those lower numbers.
We get down to capital. First one was equipment for $97.50.
Yes, sir.
What was that item?
That was those computers that we talked about, the capital outlay.
Okay, so that would be half of the outlay, the total outlay?
That's correct. That's half of the total outlay.
Well, 13 is going with us now.
That's correct. So now we would, by the motion made tonight, you guys would pay for 2/3 instead of half.
Okay. And, which is the issue we have to raise. Capital replacement there, that's actually the vehicle at $20,000 plus. Capital outlay mud owned, $35,000.
That's the extrication equipment.
I'm sorry?
That's the extrication equipment, the 35,000.
Okay,
So technically, the mud own is going to be 48,000.
That's correct.
Will be at our side, on our books.
That's for the extrication equipment and
because
2
of the,
computers.
because the extrication equipment as well as the
That's correct.
computers. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Chief Earl, I did have one question for you.
Yes.
I was looking at the tax administration. We didn't do it before, and then we have about a $3,000 deal for this year. What is that for?
Say that again.
The tax administration?
Tax
Added it to this
administration.
year, yes.
That is a
I-
great question
I do the
because that is
taxes,
not
so
something that I
I'm
budget
not
for.
sure what it's in the budget here.
I understand, but that's not something that I budget for. The tax side
Right.
is done through our finance division, which that's a number that is a holdover from last year. We'd have to go back and look at that true up.
Because, I mean, I handle all the taxes for the fire
Right.
and for the mud, so there
Right.
shouldn't be any fee that'd be associated with the town at all.
That's correct. So I'll have to go back and look at that.
Okay.
Do we need to do that before we do anything toward adopting the budget?
What's the dollar amount?
3,000, well, it's, for us, it's 16,000, yeah, 1605.
I would assume that would be a cost for just the administration of the budget that John was putting in on the town side. But I'd have to go back and look at the details. I don't, there's nothing in the detail sheet that I have printed out. And again, that's a line that I can't even see when I'm putting together the budget. That's something that's done.
Yeah, because, I mean, all the tax fees and everything on our end has to come out of different account and different
Yes, sir.
ways that we handle taxes, so I just need to make sure.
If we
I
need
think the
to
mayor has a comment.
remove that, we can.
I think from the town's perspective, we weren't going to approve the fire budget per se, but necessarily give direction as to how that rolls into our budget. And ultimately, the approval will come when we do the final approval.
That's correct.
So unless council needs to make another motion as to give direction, it'll come back to us when we consider the entire budget. It does create some problems if we change it later, but it wasn't really a final approval as far as I'm concerned.
No, because on the town side, we're just seeing that as revenue, right? So the approved budget is revenue on the town side.
It was my understanding that tonight, per the interlocal, we are approving the budget, but at the end of September, we are adopting the budget. So there are two different sort of nuances. Last year, it was my understanding that we approved the budget in this meeting, subject to not exceeding the rollback rate.
For the
And-
interlocal
Yeah.
portion. Okay, gotcha. Do y'all have any questions, council members that are not familiar with that?
Director Rose?
I do have one other thing, and this comes off of this is not in the town's packet. It's one of these things that I found that's different between the two packets. In the MUD's packet, we talk about revenues. And one of the things in the revenues, on the town side, the assessment emergency services shows a budget change decrease of a minus 3.31%. And also shows a property tax, MUD fire, increase of 13.34%. So now, as we allocate these between the two entities, is this basically driven by the fact that there has been more growth tax equation side on the MUD side than on the town side?
It's strictly to do with the evaluation on the PID. The
Okay.
difference in the PID versus everything outside the PID that gets fire taxed.
Okay, so that's what drove that.
That's correct.
Drove that difference. Okay, thank you.
Tarrant County's taxes have increased significantly this year compared to the Denton County side.
Okay, and also then the fire permit sprinkler and plan review on the town side shows a decrease of 62.8%, dropping from 90,000 down to 33.5.
Yes, sir. So those are all permits that we receive for new construction, right? So we're in the middle of finishing out PD 30, PD 25. We expect that this year the Aloft Hotel will pull their permit this year instead of next year. So that's going to reduce that. The only thing that's really left in next year will be the townhomes. So that's the inspection fee that we think that we will see from the townhomes instead of the hotel and the townhomes.
Okay, because if I remember that was part of the funding for the fire inspection.
That's correct.
Okay.
We just got a lot of that money up front, basically. So as they build a new facility like that, all of our fees are built into their initial
Yes.
their initial permit.
Okay. But you're expecting the Aloft Hotel then to happen this year, this fiscal year?
We hope so. We're not 100% sure, of course, but we have seen a preliminary set of plans, which usually means we're getting close to pulling permits. And with it being 2 months before the end of the year, we hated to push that. We're going to be right on that line. And
Yeah.
I hated to push that dollar revenue into next year's budget and then it not come to fruition.
Okay.
And as far as my understanding from John that was here, I believe we were conservative last year on that, so we had brought in more than what we showed, the 90,000. So when we do a true-up, you will see that difference on this next true-up.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So if we're gonna make a motion to approve the amended proposed budget for the interlocal agreement purposes, what's that dollar figure? Did anybody adjust that, or do we make it without that? Yes.
The agreement says town will prepare the budget and present it before August 1st. You have until August 15th to approve it.
So that's where Carmen actually was just talking about. Last year, we actually approved and adopted the budget at this meeting, but it's not required by the ILA. So with these changes, what I'd propose is let me get those final dollar figures out to you guys. I can work with Stephen as well and with Cheryl, and we can get those final dollar figures for you as part of the adoption process. Really, thank you very much for giving us the input you did and the direction. That helps us go in the right direction, not just this year, but for years to come. So thank you all.
That's okay with me, council. Everybody okay with that plan?
do we comply with the interlocal agreement?
David? I
If
believe
it's
so.
presented by August first at a joint meeting, and then both, it says both shall approve it, I'm looking at by August 15th.
We don't have council here with us tonight, but it was my understanding that we're not going to meet until, what was it, August 19th? So if there's a requirement that has to be adopted by that, I think that was not the way I read it. It
It
was
says approved by August 15th.
approved,
Kinda
and
what you
then,
were saying.
and then it actually got adopted when we did our final overall budget at the end of September, at the September board meeting. So it was a nuance in the difference between those two words, but I feel like we have general approval, but the budget itself doesn't get adopted until end of September.
Yeah, I have the verbiage here, 3.1 budget funding, A, budget preparation. Town shall prepare a budget for fire protection services and present that budget to the town council and district for approval at a joint meeting before August 1st of the year. Both parties shall approve the contractual budget by August 15th of each year. So it's been presented, I would say, for approval. We've made our inputs on it, and now we have until August the 15th to actually approve it.
Yeah. And they're going to meet before the 15th. We're not.
Well,
Unless we called a special meeting for that purpose, or you can approve it here as amended. It seems to me that you can do that.
Stephen, can you help us with the numbers real quick?
Well, I have the total. You gotta remember, mine's with the mud on here. We're looking at 1.832019, but you're just, if you want the towns, it's gonna be a little bit different.
We don't need the town for this meeting.
Okay. So we're looking at $1,832,019. Now, the only question would be the tax administration. That would be the only questionable item on here. But for my board, something we have to, before we approve it, we have to decide what to do about the reserves, how much to come out of reserves, and what we want to do. We want to just do the tools, because as of right now, as it sits, we are over the rollback rate.
okay, I think my thought is, once we get the numbers all put together, know exactly how much we're talking about, not to exceed the rollback rate, that we're gonna need to take out of the reserves, even though we've already talked about the emergency equipment coming out of the reserves. Once we get all that put together, then I think we're probably looking at a special meeting. That would be my inclination. Shouldn't be long, but that's, I think, kind of the way to approach it. That way we've done our due diligence and we're sitting here looking at it, rather than something that's a little bit nebulous at this point. Would be my thought.
The only other option is to do the quick math, right? Is to pull out the 35,000 if that's what we were gonna pull from reserves, and the 26.5. That would be the 20,000 for the pickup truck that was on your side, and
I've already corrected all that.
6,500. Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I'm just curious about is the amount we want to, if the board wants to do that, is the amount we need to take out of reserves. If you want to do all of it, or if you just want to do just a X amount of dollars, that's kind of up to the direction. The only questionable thing that's not been updated on my spreadsheet here is if we do the tax administration. That's the only thing.
So if we do the 36 plus 25, was it 26 and 35?
So 48,000 total is the capital side. 35 is for the tools. The 13 is for. So if you just wanted to, we need, like I said, around 26.
So if we
To get on
did
the rollback
that,
rate,
the
but if you-
48, took that from reserve, regardless of what happened with the tax, if we did a not to exceed, we're fine.
That's correct. Out of reserves, if you want to.
Yeah, out of reserve. So to me, it's, nothing really changes. If the tax comes off, then the budget's a little bit lower. If it stays, then it's a little bit
That's
higher.
correct. So the way I have the budget now, we can say not to exceed. If that's the direction we want to go, it's only going to get lower if we wind up
Yeah.
removing the tax administration. That's correct. But the question I would have, or the direction, or the recommendation is, based on what next year is going to be with a 3.5 cap for us, I would recommend getting as close to the rollback as we can, so we can get prepared for the next coming years for us.
Yeah.
Would be staff recommendation.
Either take a break while they do, we still won't know. Can you tell us exactly, I mean, if we were to take a 5-minute break, if we come back and you give us the exact numbers we needed for a budget motion,
I have the exact numbers right now. Or if you want a 5-minute break,
That
we can
in-
take
that
that too.
include, that include, okay, that gets you at your, that gets us at the just below the rollback rate, right?
Want to know how much just below the rollback rate, exact dollars? Is that what we're,
Yes.
okay.
Not to exceed the rollback rate.
Okay, so based on with the tax administration still in there, 20,000 will put us just a hairline under the rollback rate, 26,000 even. I'm sorry, 20,000 even. Sorry, 20, okay.
So you're saying from reserves?
That's the proposal.
From reserves, correct, which was just under the rollback.
Okay. Now,
And that's not changing what's going into GASB as you spoke with earlier.
okay. So do I have a total amount of the 2020 budget?
The total amount is $1,832,019. I'm sorry, $1,832,019.
$1,832,019.
And 19. That's correct.
Okay. I will do this. I move to approve the Fire Protection Services fiscal year 2020 budget in a total amount not to exceed $1,832,019, no cents, and also to remove $20,000 from the reserves to supplement the budget.
We have a motion by Vice President Rose to approve the Fire Protection Service budget in the amount not to exceed $1,832,019, while taking $20,000 from the reserves. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Chapman. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone.
I think we're done. Is that right?
You wanna call the meeting?
So it's 8:07 and council is adjourned.
It is 8:07. Turf Club Mud 1 District is adjourned.
One item, we're out of here.